Oh, hello! My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So it's that time of the month, time to talk about what I am reading right now, what I've recently been reading, what I might read next. My mid-month check-in, basically, on how reading is going. I am actually filming this just because of the way Thanksgiving traveling is timing out. I'm filming this a little earlier than I would like to, but I still have gotten a fair amount done. Actually, so far this month, I think I've read 11 books, so I definitely have things to talk about. But yeah, so far it's been a very mixed bag reading-wise because I, in the first part of the month, was finishing up my lowest rated books on my Goodreads TBR challenge, and so that caused things to be pretty grim. You can see the video that I posted, the first half of what I was reading for that, I think already went up, and the second half will be coming out, I think, the last week of the month. So yeah, suffice it to say, I had a lot of bad reading because of that challenge, including the worst book that I've read so far this year. So I will just refer you to that video if you want to hear more about it. I definitely have a full ranty rage moment because of that book. What are you gonna do? However, besides that, I did have a couple of things I really enjoyed reading so far this month. So first, I read Little White Lies. I had an arc of that from Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Now, if you watch this channel, you know that Jennifer Lynn Barnes wrote one of my all-time favorite YA series, which is the Natural series. And that is essentially YA Criminal Minds. It's a set of tropes that really works for me, and her writing is just really excellent, I think, in YA. I think she's one of the better writers of kind of non-fantasy YA that's writing right now. She's really great. I will say that this particular book did not work as well for me as The Naturals did. I think that boils down to the tropes that she's using, not so much the writing, because I think the writing and the characters were what I enjoyed most about this book, because I just think that she's just an excellent technician, basically. Two things about this book that kept me from fully loving it. One is just the setup and the tropes, which is basically, this is sort of almost like a melodrama mystery, maybe in the tradition of something like the TV show Revenge. But the setup is sort of like Rory's situation in the Gilmore Girls, which is that there's a girl who has just turned 18 and her estranged, very, very rich grandmother offers her $500,000 if she will come live with her for a year and participate in a debutante coming out season. And it turns out she's learning about secrets from her past and all the underbelly of these rich people's lives and all the dramas and scandals and murder, mayhem, all of it. And she ends up sort of forming a kind of girl gang with some of her fellow debutantes. So I think it was good. I gave it a 3.5 star. It's a good book. I enjoyed it. It just it didn't fully connect with me because I didn't like the tropes as much. It's just not really my kind of thing, even though I do love Gilmore Girls, just in this form, it wasn't my thing. And then also it had a dual timeline. And I think at the end of the book, you see why she chose to do that, but for me, it just didn't work. I often don't really like dual timelines in YA, and this is no exception. So all that to say, I gave it 3.5 stars. Read the description. If you think it sounds interesting and something that you would like, 100% pick it up because it's very well written and I really like the characters. I very well probably will continue in this series because I really liked the characters and wanted to spend more time with them. It just, the plot wasn't everything I was hoping. And then that was a 3.5 star book for me, which I would still consider a good book, one that I enjoyed. And then I have 3 4-star books I wanted to tell you about. So first up, let's talk about MONSTRESS, which is this is Awakening, I think. Yeah, Volume 1, Awakening. So this is the first volume in the MONSTRESS graphic novel series. There's 3 out so far. I will definitely be continuing in this. I think I'm going to pick up a volume a month kind of a thing. I enjoyed this, but think that the pacing is weird. I think the first third of this book is weird. I think it really picks up around the middle of it, and by the end I'm like, yes, I really want to know what's going on, I want to keep reading, but I just think that there are some narratively there's some pacing issues. The artwork is so beautiful. Let me see if I can find, there was this one spread that I was just like, oh my god, this is so beautiful. It's kind of it's a graphic novel, sort of the more manga style, but with an Art Nouveau twist. So it is just absolutely, oh, here it is. Okay. I just loved this image. Do you see how, oh God, I just think that's so beautiful. And this is actually chapter 2. And I think starting in chapter 2, I was really into this. The first chapter I was not as into. The other thing that surprised me about this was the level of the male gaze that I felt in this, and I found that weird because this is written by two women. I just found like the way the women were drawn in this a little off-putting at first. As the book progressed, I think I see more what they're trying to do with this style. Anyway, just warning you that I found that to be weird, which is honestly what keeps me from reading more manga or graphic novels, is I get a little icked out by how women in general are drawn in these. I don't like it usually. So this was a surprise to me that I didn't love it, and those are sort of the reasons why I didn't like give it 4.5 or 5 star, which was honestly kind of what I was expecting. But that said, I really, both of these things that I've been talking about that I enjoyed sound like I don't. I just have criticisms of them. They weren't perfect. But I very much enjoyed this and am excited to continue. And I think, especially since things were picking up towards the end, I think I will probably like it more and more as the series goes on. There's also a twist right at the end that I suspected but was still gagged by once I saw that that was the twist. And I was like, the drama of it all. The next 4-star book that I wanted to mention that I read recently was We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Now, this was one of my picks that I wanted to try to get to for Nonfiction November. We will talk about the other one that I'm hoping to get to later. But this is essentially collections on each year of Barack Obama's presidency, as reflected by Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I think is a really provocative and really thoughtful kind of modern philosopher almost on race in America. I would really recommend this book. It's very good. It wasn't a full hit for me only because a good chunk of this book is him summarizing arguments that I've already read either from their original arguer or I have read a history of the argument already. So it didn't have the same, it didn't pack the same punch for me that it probably would have had I not already read this year Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi and The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. I also am very familiar with what Michelle Alexander argues about mass incarceration, just from all the podcasts I listen to. So anyway, I think that this book is very, very good. It just wasn't as impactful as I was expecting it to be because I had encountered some of the arguments already. That being said, I really enjoyed him unpacking more about where he's coming from philosophically. I think that that's really helpful in contextualizing his work, and I think that him being somebody who comes explicitly from an atheistic philosophical worldview is a very important voice in kind of the discourse about race in America, because he does not have what someone, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X both were coming from explicitly religious standpoints, and that comes with a certain set of kind of underlying philosophical principles that he doesn't share. And I think that that makes for some interesting tensions in his work with some other kind of historical threads of ideas about race in America. And I was excited to see him unpack that more. So anyway, I really did enjoy this. I listened to it on audio, which I would say is fine, but I switched over to reading it towards the end and probably preferred actually reading it to the audio. Just FYI, it's not bad audio. I just personally preferred reading on the page with this one. But yeah, 4 stars, really enjoyed, would recommend. Not as amazing as I was hoping it would be, but I think that's more just sort of personal, your mileage may vary kind of a thing. And then the other thing that I actually just finished reading this morning was Visions and Death by J.D. Robb. Now, if you are a regular watcher of this channel, you know that I've been trying to read this goddamn book for 3 months, and I finally did it. I finally finished it. It was the 19th installment in the In Death series. It was a really, really good one. I don't really want to get into what it's about too much because it would spoil parts of the series, and I don't want to do that. It was really excellent. Both the plotting of it was very, very good. Sometimes there's some variability to how good the actual mystery plots of these books are. Sometimes they're better than others. Sometimes they're more at the forefront. Sometimes they're more at the back. I think this one had a really nice balance of having a very interesting mystery that was more towards the front. But the character development in this one was just so good. It was really satisfying. I mean, it's so amazing that 19 books in, there's still things that I'm watching unfold between these relationships, things that I'm waiting to have unspooled for me. I think there's 44 books so far in the series, so I'm not even halfway, but I still really want more. And it's not just oh, I want another kind of crime of the week kind of thing. I want more from these characters. Something I also want to say about this series. So I don't want to get too detailed in here because I don't want to be too, much for what some people might be in the place to handle today. But I am a survivor of sexual assault, and I have a very hard time reading stories where that is a main part of the character's backstory because it is too much for me to deal with often. In particular, I would not have read this series if I knew the amount of abuse that the main character suffered as a child. I would not have been able to read this. That being said, I'm really glad I did, because I think that this is the rare example of commercial fiction that actually handles a history of either sexual assault or sexual abuse in a way that is helpful. Because it both shows Eve, who is like one of the most genuinely kick-ass female leads I have ever read. Like, she's up there with Kate Daniels. Actually, I think Kate Daniels is a lot based on Eve Dallas, because there's a lot of similarities there. She is an incredibly strong character who is also still incredibly like wounded by her past, and like that is a major part of her character development. And what I really like about this, something that I don't like in a lot of commercial fiction that tries to use this stuff as a backstory for its characters, is it either goes the route of making it like they're so broken and you get the sense that they're never going to be unbroken and like it feels like it just has kind of ruined their lives in a way they're never going to get over. Or they're like, oh, I've had my revelation, I'm all better now. I love, and part of why I can keep reading these and it's not too much for me to take, is that she is really strong. Like, what happened to her really formed her and like made her into the person that she is. She is a very strong woman who is moving forward and has conquered a lot of it. But like, she is still dealing with it on a book-to-book basis. Like, she still has nightmares. She still has certain situations she's in that she can't handle and needs help from her friends and from her husband. Like, it's an ongoing process of healing. And I think that is so much more realistic and so much more resonant to me as I'm reading than the way a lot of these other books want to handle it. And I just appreciate the sensitivity that J.D. Robb brings to that subject matter in this book. I also like that the scenes of violence are written in a way that it is very easy to skim them, and you do not have to actually read the details of that to be able to continue with the book, which is what I tend to do. So if she's having a nightmare or a flashback, I usually can just skim through that and I don't have to read it and experience that, and it doesn't diminish any enjoyment I have of the book. So I wanted to give it a particular shout out because in this book there's some character development around that stuff. And so if you are somebody who typically cannot read that, it's too much. First of all, if you never want to try to read that, that is totally fine. If you would like to dip your toes back in, I can tell you that I think this is an author who handles it with a lot of sensitivity. She's neither overly fetishizing it, nor is she overly glib about it. And I think that the scenes themselves are written in a way that you do not have to read them if you don't want to. You can know that they happened without having to get into the details. So I thought because this was a particularly good installment, I would have given it 4.5 if it didn't have, I think, probably about 10% too much kind of in the middle of the book. But this was a particularly good installment, and it just reminded me that I really appreciate that about J.D. Robb, and I think she does an excellent job with that subject matter as her sort of like background to things. Okay, so that's what I have been reading. What I am currently reading right now, one is, oh, I forgot to grab it. Let me grab it. This one. So I started SAWKILL Girls by Claire Legrand. This is a good book, but it is not the book I was expecting. So I got about 70 pages into this and decided I need to put it down because I was not enjoying it because my expectations weren't being met, and my expectations weren't being met because it was not the kind of book I thought it was going to be. So just for context, I thought this was going to be more magical than it is. I think this is much closer to like magical realism, which is great, fine. The writing is very nice. I definitely think I will end up enjoying this, but it wasn't what I was expecting. So just FYI, I started this, but I'm going to put it down for now because it just wasn't quite what I was in the mood to read at that point. So FYI on this. I am also about 30% into Red Sisters by Mark Lawrence. Now, I got this from the library, and I picked it up because I had seen so many people raving about it here on BookTube, especially channels I watch that are like a lot of SFF. They all seem to really enjoy this. And I'm always looking for immersive fantasy that I can actually get into because sometimes I struggle with immersive fantasy, but I am loving this. It is so good. It's about like badass ninja nuns and like our cool religion, and I'm just way into this. It's sort of like a coming of age type story because the main characters are younger. Anyway, it is as good as people have been saying, at least for this reader, and I've been really enjoying that. So I am currently in the middle of that one as well. Okay, and in terms of things I might read next, so let's start with the challenges. For nonfiction November, I already read We Rate Yours in Power. The other book I was hoping to get to for nonfiction November was Not That Bad by Roxane Gay. This is a collection of essays that she edited about rape culture, and I started it and just kind of didn't get back to it because other things became more pressing. It's also hard to read this because like topic-wise this is rough, but I do want to see if I can finish this up this month. I would like to finish it before the end of the year, and we are rapidly coming up on the end of the year, so I want to get to this sooner than later. The other pick I might get to from the library, I just got a notification like now, that I have White Fragility out on audio right now. I forget who the author is, but basically it's talking about sort of like white identity in the rise of sort of like Black Lives Matter and whatnot, and essentially about how the historical oppression of non-white people doesn't need to be threatening to white people. And so like, if you watch my response to Is BookTube Racist, if you watch that video, you kind of know that that's something I'm very interested in and feel really passionately about, that like we need to learn how, like we as white people need to learn how to like lower the defensiveness, because like it's just not productive basically. So anyway, I'm interested to listen to that audio. So I think those will probably round out my nonfiction picks for the month for Nonfiction November. Then this is the first round of Tome Topple that I am planning on participating in, and I am very excited. So I forget what all the challenges are. I know that the ones that I'm going to be able to address are to read more than one tome, and a tome in this context is defined as a book with more than 500 pages, to read a sequel, and to read an adult book, because both of these are actually adults, so that fulfills things. So these are my 2 tomes. These are essentially what I'm planning on reading over the Thanksgiving holiday week, which is next week here in America. I will be working from home, from my mother's home that week. And anyway, these are the 2 books that I'm taking that I want to get through. And both of them are over 500 pages, and both are ones I've been wanting to read. So first of all, we have Stiletto by Daniel O'Malley. This is the sequel to The Rook, which is an all-time favorite book of mine. And I got, at some point, I think I got about 50 pages into this and basically just got pulled away from it. I wasn't loving it as much as The Rook, but like I think it would be hard for me to love anything he did as much as The Rook. Maybe it's possible, we'll see. But anyway, this is the sequel, and I definitely wanted to get to this year because this has been on my want to read for so long. And so I want to just finally go ahead and get to it because I think I'm really going to enjoy it, and this will be a fun like holiday read for me. So that's my first tome. Then my second tome is The Witch Elm by Tana French. Now this barely clocks in at 500 pages, but it does make it. And this is a new release from her. I read In the Woods when it first came out and really enjoyed it, but wasn't interested in it as a series, if that makes sense. Now, I wouldn't say never. I do think I probably will end up reading The Likeness, which is the second book in that series at some point, just because a book olive highlighted it as a read-alike title for The Secret History. So from that, I was like, ooh, I'm actually, okay, I am kind of interested in reading that. So I may read like a smattering from that series going forward. But this is the first standalone that I know of from her. The premise sounded really interesting to me, and I'm interested in like getting on board with her as a standalone author. So I'm quite excited about this. This is a mystery. This is the right time of year where I like to read mysteries. All around, I think this will be something I enjoy. So those are my two tomes, if I can get them looking right, that I'm going to read for Tome Topple. And then I don't know what else I'll read. I'm thinking that I probably will get to Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse this month because it is Native American Heritage Month. And she is an own voice writer of urban fantasy that is using Native American mythology as its base. I have been so wanting to read this, but again, broken record, I've had so many library things and ARC stuff out that I've just not been able to get to it, but I really want to read it. I've heard really good reviews. I actually recommended it to a friend of mine who needed it, who needed a book like that, like a urban fantasy based on like non-Western magic systems for a reading challenge she was doing. She doesn't even read urban fantasy or romance normally, and she really loved it. So I'm like, oh, I want to get to this. So anyway, I would like to get to that this month just to celebrate Native American Heritage Month from an Own Voices author. So I would like to read that. I have Monday's Not Coming out from the library right now, which is a YA mystery about a girl who's looking for her friend who just went missing. So I'm hoping I can get to that before my time with it is up. And then I have an audiobook of Forces of Nature by Jane Harper out from the library. I think I talked about that last month as well, that I had it out. I let it go back because I had actually bought it from Book Outlet and it was in my Book Outlet order that went missing. It's a whole thing, whatever. So I got it back out from the library, so I might listen to that as audio. But yeah, beyond that, the world is my oyster. Now that I am like pretty much caught up on ARCs and like I don't have a ton of library, like I only have 1 or 2 library things out at a time right now. It's crazy how that just like opens up space for you to read what you're in the mood to read. It's awesome and I'm into it. Okay, I think that that's enough of what I'm reading right now for now. I will touch base with you guys again once November is over and we will talk about how things went overall. But so far, like, I mean, the disappointing reads definitely were very disappointing, but I definitely had some high spots and I'm just, again, I think I'm enjoying the process of reading more right now because I'm just doing mood reading and that feels great. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. Let me know maybe what you're reading right now, if you're going to participate in Nonfiction November or Tome Topple. I think that will do it. I hope you guys are having a great day and I will talk to you soon. Bye.